Sam Wells, who is the Dean of the Duke Chapel and Research Professor of Christian Ethics. Thank you, Sam, for being with us.
Great pleasure.
Sam is with us today because there is an important conversation and panel discussion that's going to happen on September 28th at the Duke Divinity School. And Sam is a participant, and his wife, the Reverend Dr. Joe Bailey Wells, who is the head of the Anglican Episcopal House at Duke Divinity School, is hosting this conversation. And the title is intriguing. And then I want to ask Sam to tell us a little bit. It's called Fathoming an Archbishop. What is Rowan Williams up to? And when you go to the website, you'll be able to see this incredible picture of the Archbishop. And it's a fascinating conversation. One, tell us a little bit about the panel and what will be happening there. And then two, I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about your relationship with the Archbishop.
Well, Bishop Porter Taylor from the western side of the state is going to be with us, and Marilyn McCord Adams, who formerly held one of the most distinguished chairs in theology in England up until very recently and now lives locally. She's also going to be on the panel, and me as well. And I first met Rowan Williams, I think, in 1986 or something like that, so it's been a while, 25 years or so, when I was an undergraduate in Oxford. And I was doing history, but I found my history lectures quite dull, and I found that somebody said, there's this amazing guy, and he's like Aslan. You know,
really?
And actually, I've been listening to the CDs with my children of the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and the person they have to play Aslan sounds just like Rowan Williams. and so they said, come and meet this lion, who's teaching theology, and he was actually, he's a good deal younger than I am now, and he seemed old to me then, but he was in his 30s, and he was holding this very distinguished chair of theology at Oxford, and he did these wonderful lectures on Christology, which I still remember, and they weren't anything to do with my course, but I went along to them anyway. And in the evenings, he used to have on a Tuesday night, I remember, from 8 o'clock till 10 o'clock or so, any student could come back and just drop in and talk. And so I first met him as a professor, but then I met him as a pastor, because I remember a friend of mine, a very close friend of mine, was thinking about having an abortion. It was a very difficult situation. And I hadn't been in a situation like this before personally, or with a friend, and I remember talking it through with him a great deal. And so I then discovered him, apart from being a professor, as being a wonderful pastor, and then as a preacher. And I think, rather like you, he sometimes uses a text, and those texts get published, but actually you really want to catch him when he's not using a text, just like yourself. People sometimes find him a little bit difficult to understand, but when you get him off message and you get him to put things in words of one syllable, that's when you really want to enjoy him. So I had a chance to enjoy him in all of those ways. And then I think the most wonderful thing for me was that I didn't see him then for 3 or 4 years, and then he came to a conference in Edinburgh where I was at seminary, and I remember I saw him from about 30 or 40 yards away, and he called out my name, and I was so touched that, I was only in my 20s, and he remembered who I was. And that taught me about the quality of the person as a pastor. I think all the people, watching this who are pastors themselves would love to have that ability 4 or 5 years later to be able to remember somebody's name, but I'm afraid I don't think I did have that quality. But he had it instantly, and that shows, something about the quality of the person. And so since then I've interacted with him in a number of ways, some of them academic. He's come to speak at 1 or 2 conferences, and then just before I moved here, I put together a 3 or 4 day conference with Sarah Coakley, who's now a professor in Cambridge, used to be at Harvard, and we invited Rowan, and he actually stayed with us those 3 or 4 days, and the little book came out of the conference called Praying for England. It was really reflecting on his comments at his original press conference when he was appointed Archbishop, I think in about 2002, that he sought to recapture the imagination of the nation for Christ. And we were having a 3 or 4 day conference with people who had an interest in academic theology, but also were based in parishes, to discuss what recapturing the imagination of the nation might possibly mean. So I've got a huge amount of respect for him, and it's a very interesting invitation to be part of this panel.
Well, one of the things about all 3 of you are scholars in your own right, but in particular, you bring that personal relation. You know something of his head, but something of his heart as well, it sounds like.
Yeah, I think to me the secret is, I suppose, I think Marilyn McCord Adams probably shares this with me, and I know my wife Jo does, that having spent time in ministry on both sides of the Atlantic, we've not necessarily by choice, but found ourselves with a vocation to interpret the one side to the other and the other, and then in both directions. And I find myself explaining the Episcopal Church to people in the Church of England quite a lot when I'm over there, and even more explaining the Church of England to members of the Episcopal Church when I'm over here. And I guess that this event is pretty similar, because I think Rowan sees the Anglican Communion very much like a rector of a Church of England parish would see a Church of England parish. That's to say, whereas you sometimes find in an Episcopal Church here, there can be a sense, because we live in a kind of market economy of churches, that we stand for what we stand for, and if you don't like it, you can go to that lot up the road, because they offer something different. That's your scene. Whereas in the Church of England, there are some clergy that take that view, but most clergy, and certainly I was one of them, take the view that we don't have the luxury of saying that. We simply have to find a way to bring together into one body all the people that come under our charge, and those people might diametrically disagree about some of the issues of the day, and we may have our own views about some of the issues of the day, but our job is to make a big tent of all of those people. That's the broad church tradition, I suppose, of the Church of England, of which I see myself as being a part, and I think Rowan is very much in that tradition. But also, there's a sense in the Church of England that the church isn't just for the people inside it, it also has a witness to the wider community. A rector of a Church of England parish has the cure of souls of the whole of the parish, not just the members. You don't really use the word members very much in Church of England polity.
And a parish in England is not only
it's a
geographical area.
Yeah, it's a residential area. It's a geographical area. So all the people, whether Muslim, Jew, Buddhist, or have no stated faith, or members of the Church of England or another Christian denomination, they're all part of your charge, and you're there to serve them. And one of the ways in which you serve them is by offering a model of life which can bring people together despite profound disagreements. So I perceive what Rowan's doing with the Anglican Communion is operating like a Church of England rector would in a parish, and in some ways that's very much the model that I try to use for my role as Dean of Duke Chapel as well, as to see the 35,000 odd people who are student staff and faculty members at the university in the same kind of way. I'm there to serve the people who worship, but I'm also there in some ways, at the best of my ability, and through the institution of the chapel, to be a blessing to the whole campus. And it's the same kind of philosophy which is formed within that Church of England parish mentality.
Well, shifting gears just slightly, and while our primary focus is on this upcoming panel discussion, you're going to be the retreat leader and keynote leader for the Springtide event of the School of Ministry.
I am.
Have you thought a little bit about what you'll be doing?
Well, I've talked to Edith Mumford about this, and I'm a man under instruction. But I also I'm looking forward to it very much, partly because I'm a fellow clergy member under your authority, like everybody else, and it's a great time to sort of rub shoulders with some of my colleagues, which, because of the pattern of my life as being very much part of the academic calendar and the campus culture, that I don't get to do as much as I'd like to do. So this is a wonderful chance to do that. I'm particularly pleased to be invited and honoured to be invited for that reason. I think if I think about myself and what are the continuities in my own ministry, I have I think a long and deep-seated love of the church in its ordinary parish form. I'm the fourth generation clergyman, and we've all been in parish ministry most of our careers. I also have, from a fairly early age, realised that I had a mind that needed to be applied in study and a gift for writing, and I needed to find a way to incorporate that in my vocation in the church. But also I've had a particular concern about poverty, which, like everyone who has a particular concern, I don't understand why not everybody seems to share. It seems a no-brainer to me. But the majority of my ministry prior to coming here was spent in disadvantaged communities, and that was because I read the New Testament and I thought, if I'm going to meet Jesus, that's where he most commonly shows up, so I need to be there. And so what I'm going to try and do on the Springtide conference is to bring the insights that I've found from serving in underprivileged communities for quite 10 years or so, significant length of time, and to reflect on what are good and less good models of social engagement that Christians and other people might